The reading is taken from 1 Samuel chapter 8. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges for Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah, and they served at Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. And they said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." But when they said, "Give me a king to lead us," they displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you that they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. And they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are now doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will do." Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "This is what the king who will reign over you will do. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they run in front of the chariots. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plough his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants, your men servants and maid servants, and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, and the Lord will not answer you in that day." But the people refused to listen to Samuel. "No," they said, "we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles." When Samuel heard all that the people said, he repeated it before the Lord. The Lord answered, "Listen to them and give them a king." Then Samuel said to the men of Israel, "Go back to his town." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
So my name's Steve. I'm a member of the church here. I've been for a number of years, and church warden at our sister church, Holy Trinity, at least for now, until a planned coup next week, which I'm very much looking forward to. And hello to everyone on Zoom. Hello to everyone in the creche. Put down that toy. Can't play with that one. We can see you. So some of you were here last week. I'm going to try to take a fresh look at some of what we've been looking at, because I know that some of you are here for the first time this week, so I'm not going to continue everything that we talked about. But those of you who were here last week did see that Simon started with a bit of show and tell, and he brought his passport along. I actually want to start with a bit of show and tell myself, actually, because I want to show you some of my favourite Bible pages. I'll explain why in a minute, because some of my favourite pages are the stuff before actually the writing begins. This is the... we're just going to test the technology as well. Yeah, we're on YouTube. We're going to do the Chris Whitty show, I think. So this is... that's the first page of my Bible, right? Which is a lovely inscription from my granddad, who gave me this Bible on his graduation. The next page, next slide, tells you everything you need to know about my granddad, because that's the page for writing inscriptions that he didn't actually use. But then we're getting to the good bit. So next slide, then you get into like maps and stuff, right? I love the maps in the Bible. And next slide is timelines. As you can see, front of my Bible's got these timelines about when stuff happened in terms of what we're reading and what we're talking about. And that's important, right? Because the setting of what we just read was 3,000 years ago, right? Stuff was very different back then. Transportation was horses. latest technology apparently would be things like door locks and sausages. It's true, sausages were invented by the Romans, I discovered, and I'm more pleased about that than sewers and roads and everything else they did. I think the sausage was their greatest innovation. Economies back then were growing, so all very different to today, is my point. And that's why timelines are important. So we're going to start this morning by just looking at that. Today is going to be, actually a bit of history, bit of politics, bit of geography. So great for nerds. If you're in, one of you, there's one nerd in, that's good, I'm pleased to hear it. So why am I showing the timeline? But I think the next slide zooms in a little on what we've got there, because what we're really interested in is the passage we read today is right where a whole pink bar of the timeline changes to yellow. This is such a significant part of the Bible, it's reflected as a different era on the timeline page at the front of my Bible. We're moving from the era of judges to kings. It's a major moment, and I want to understand the context of that before we kind of delve into what we just heard read. So if you can see a little bit of that whole timeline up there, you can see at the very start of that, we've got Exodus. So I just want to paint you the picture of this group of people very quickly, covering a period of actually several hundred years, right? They started out living under a king. That king was Pharaoh Ramesses II while they were in Egypt. And they were slaves. These people were working as laborers, servants, midwives, looking after other people's children, not having the time to look after their own. Until God chose an orphaned refugee by the name of Moses to lead them out of that. Okay, so they lived under a king. It was not good. Moses leads them out of that. Then they build up their sort of frequent fleer miles for a few years. There's lots of fleeing that goes on. And they eventually settle in a land called Canaan. And they have 350 years of being ruled by judges. So you can think of judges as they were really religious leaders. So you can think of Israel at this time pretty much as a religious state. Not necessarily in modern times, in the Western world, what we consider as a good system, but these were a group of people tied together by their religious beliefs and by God's command, and so they had leaders who were prophets, whose job was not to lead from the front, but to lead from the back, and guide the people in terms of their connection and relationship with God. So these prophets, these judges, over 350 years, were the leadership of the kingdom. Well, wasn't a king, kingdom's the wrong word, isn't it? At that time, leader of the people. And there was some good, some bad. So names you will have heard of maybe: Deborah, Gideon, Samson, and finally Samuel, who was kind of the last judge. His sons were kind of appointed leader for a while, maybe they were the last judge. But anyway, this is the end of that period. And Samuel is the person we've been following for 8 weeks as we've talked about his story. And there's 4 words that mark the change from these 2 eras. And it's when the people of Israel say to Samuel, "Give us a king." Okay? We don't want this regime of prophets anymore. We want a king. Why so significant? Why is that such a big deal that it's a color change on the timeline of my Bible? Well, I'm going to just reread the verses that refer to that we heard in the reading. So in verses 6 to 9, "But when they said, 'Give us a king to lead us,' this displeased Samuel, and he prayed to the Lord. And the Lord said, 'Listen to all the people. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king.' By asking for a king, it's a distinct statement to say we don't want God as our king. As they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt unto this day, forsaking me." Forsaking means left out, vacant. So this is a real statement of we want a different system. We want our own human king. And, God warned them that, a king would be bad, but they push on. And I've lost Jenny now, but I'm going to talk about her. Because, when Jenny is... in about 7 years' time, here's my prediction for Jenny. Amelia is going to come up in about 7 years' time and say, "Mum," maybe she'll come to her granny, "Mum, Granny, All the other girls at school have got a mobile phone. Can I have a mobile phone? Okay. And Jenny will be a good parent and she'll go, let me warn you of like all the things, the problems you have with a mobile phone. You're going to have to look after it, all these other things. And then she's going to put her puppy dog eyes on and go, yeah, but I still want a mobile phone. And Jenny will cave. And you will cave. That's my prediction. And this is what's happening here. God is trying to parent these people and say, look, really, you sure you want a king? Because this is what's going to happen when you got a king. Don't you remember? It wasn't great with the previous king. But they come back and said, no, we want a king. Why did they want a king so badly? Right? Why? The real reason seems to come up a bit later in the passage. So in verse 20, as we heard read, after the warning, the people said, no, we want a king over us, because then, one, we'll be like all other nations, and the king will lead us out and fight our battles. They wanted a king for two reasons. Number one was to fit in with everybody else. Throughout all we've been studying about Samuel, a lot of this has been about God saying to his people, I want you to be a bit different to everybody else. I want you to live in a different way. And here at this point, by crying out for a king, they want to be like everybody else. How many times have we drifted from God because we want to fit in with everybody else? Because it's difficult being different and living on different rules and principles. But the second reason they wanted a king was significance in the world. Right? This was a time of conquest. And we need to understand what kings really did back then, because it's a bit different to kings now. Right? Our kings sort of open supermarkets and don't talk to their sons very often and things like that. Right? That's what we know them for. But kings back then were very different. So I'm just going to put the map. There's a map. It's a very accurately drawn map that I've got on the screen. So you have to imagine this is a map of effectively the Holy Land. That's the Mediterranean Sea on the left, if you can't make it out. This is the extent of my PowerPoint skills. But this is where Israel sat at that time in terms of other kingdoms. And, in particular, the two largest and most influential kingdoms at the time was Assyria in the north, Egypt down in the south. And I want you to understand what it means for them when they're saying, give us a king. Because they're probably thinking that the king of Egypt at the time was Pharaoh Susenes. In Assyria, it was a king called Shalmaneser II, apparently. It took me a while to match up the dates. Shalmaneser II didn't do very much. But if you just go back a few years, whilst Samuel was around, not hundreds of years, just a few years, the king in Assyria was somebody called Tiglath-Pileser I. So there's a pointless answer if you ever get on the show. Tiglath-Pileser I. Now, a lot was known about him. And you'll understand what I'm saying about kings when I give his full name. So this is his full name. He was Tiglath-Pileser I, unrivaled king of the universe, king of the four quarters, king of all princes, lord of lords, whose weapons the god Assur has sharpened, and whose name he has pronounced eternally for control of the four quarters, splendid flame which covers the hostile land like a rainstorm. I don't know if that was in the baby name book, but I've worked out it doesn't fit on a bib. That was his full name, full title, right? On one of the inscriptions about him is he conquered 42 nations and their rulers. You see, a king, was your biggest, bravest, strongest guy, right, who would go out and conquer for you. That's what they said. They said, we're fed up of being a little land, actually. We want a king. We want to go and win some stuff. We want to achieve. We want to succeed, but in terms that we see success as. Apparently, being tall was an important element of being a king back then. I have no objection to that at all. He's not, my favourite tall king actually is a king called Boleslaw the Tall, which is true. Do you want to put Boleslaw on the screen? That's Boleslaw the Tall. He was king in Poland in 1170. His sons were Henry the Bearded and Conrad the Curly. It's true, you can Google it. I don't know why I put that in there. I just thought it was fascinating. It's got nothing to do with Samuel. But the point is, a king was cool, right? A king made you a player in regional politics. Have a war, win some battles, get a bit of kudos. It turned out, in the end, it wasn't so cool for them because it didn't really work out. So look, that's a lot of historical stuff, and I make no apology for that. I also understand what was really going on for them, at that time. But there are three things, I think, as we kind of project this to our lives, in modern-day United Kingdom, what does this mean for us? Look, I think the first thing I really draw from this is the conclusion that, number one, is we all live with a deep dissatisfaction about something. Right? The only reason Israel were pushing for a king was they just weren't happy with what they had. They felt there should be more, something else. And this whole time, in this whole series of talks we've been having on this period with Samuel, that's been the theme. It's been constantly God saying, hey, I've got you covered, right? Stay with me. I'm in control. I've got it. But people going, no, there's something else, and then trying to find it in different places. They thought a king would fill that need, give them purpose, victory, meaning. We sing a song here sometimes where the starting line is, there must be more than this, which I think just reflects that feeling in society. It's a uniquely human thing, right? My dog doesn't stand there looking at me saying, there must be more than this, except it's his dinner, unless it's his dinner. That's all he's referring to. But he's not referring to the kind of deepness in our spirit that says there's something else. It's a longing in all of us. There's some research done by a group called Springtide Research. They do research generally on young adults in UK, US, a number of other countries. In 2021, they surveyed 18 to 25-year-olds, and a quarter of them believed in a higher power. Right? A quarter of them were spiritually seeking something. They repeated that research in 2023, just last year. And in those 2 years, the number of young people believing in a higher power, seeking spirituality, had increased dramatically. A third of young people in this. Our young people in this country know there's something else, and they're looking for it. They're searching for answers. Where are they going to look, and where are they going to find it? So my second main point, we all have that deep longing, but the second main point is that if you look for it in people, people will let you down. Samuel warned them about kings, and he was right. Now, if we fast forward the story, they got exactly the king that they wanted, right? They got a king called Saul. He was respected. He was tall. He was strong. Okay, but if you think that hole is going to get filled by a person, a leader, a system, or a philosophy, it isn't. Saul started well, but he became dishonest, proud, jealous, couldn't acknowledge his own mistakes. So they tried to improve it. After Saul came a king called David, right? We all know about David, a man after God's heart. But he still managed to sleep with one of his general's wives, and then he murdered the general just to keep it quiet. Then came Solomon, right? Tried to make him successful. God granted him great wisdom. But Solomon, who was David's illegitimate son, brought crushing taxes. He built ruinous palaces. He bankrupted the economy, had 700 wives, worshipped other gods. And if you thought it got better, his son Rehoboam, one quote from him, "My father scourged with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions." That's probably all you need to know about Rehoboam. Partygate would have been light relief, I think, with that series of leaders. Samuel did his best when he appointed Saul. Saul got a good start, spiritual awakening. He chose David for them. Solomon had wisdom. But 400 years of kings never really worked until the Israelites ended up being conquered again and sent into exile. The Bible's full of these warnings that without God in charge, things go bad. I love this little story a little earlier in Judges. This is from Actually, yeah, thank you. It's on the screen. I love this little section, Judges 9. I'm going to read it out. I think it's really powerful. One day the trees went out to anoint a king for themselves. They said to the olive tree, "Be our king." But the olive tree answered, "Should I give it my oil, by which both gods and humans are honored, to hold sway over the trees?" Next the tree said to the fig tree, "Come and be our king." But the fig tree replied, "Should I give it my fruit, good and sweet, to hold sway over the trees?" Then the tree said to the vine, "Come and be our king." But the vine answered, "Should I give it my wine, which cheers both gods and humans, to hold sway over the trees?" Finally, all the trees said to the thorn bush, "Come and be our king." And the thorn bush was a tree that didn't bear fruit. It wasn't a good tree. It was the tree that signified a curse. So people will let you down. Presidents, prime ministers, kings, queens, bishops, CEOs. So what's the answer? I want to show a video just in a second. I'll give Luke a bit of time to cue it up. Because I came across this week. This is the comedian Russell Brand, who became a Christian recently and was baptized this week. I'm going to show about a 90-second clip of him talking about his baptism. And just by way of background, I don't know if you know him. He is somebody who's had, let's say, a checkered past. Is that fair to say? He's not one of my favorite celebrities. And I was very, very skeptical going in to listen to this video. I just want to play a short section of it now.
And for your convenience, and my whole life long, I felt a calling and mistranslated it time after time as various forms of addiction, substance misuse and drinking too much, and an overwhelming urge to lose myself in concupiscence, continually looking for love in all the wrong places. And isn't it extraordinary, any of you that have experienced this already, to get baptized? You feel like, how can this ceremony have any real import? How can the gentle, or actually in my case, quite radical immersion beneath water, and in my case, a live river, make any real difference? How can the sins of the past be washed away? How can you be born again? How can you awaken anew? I suppose to answer that question, you have to inquire in what you consider the self to be, whether you're made up just of impulses and urges and memories, or whether or not you believe there is a ghost in the machine, or more likely a Holy Spirit if you're willing to invite it into your life. For me, I've reached a point in my life where for a long while, in fact, I've known that the material world was not enough. And more than that, as many of you are surely already mouthing, it's not even about you. This I've learned as an addict in recovery. The pursuit of my own goals and my own agenda always leaves me cold and always leaves me empty and always leaves me wanting more. You can never have enough of what you don't really want.
You can never have enough of what you don't really want. Well, I have to confess, when I first heard that Russell Brand had been baptized, my first worry was, oh my gosh, am I going to have to spend eternity with Russell Brand? Was literally the first thing that crossed my mind, which is not fair to him. We should give him, every kind of opportunity. Fascinating to hear that, right? Because if anyone, has tried to fill that dissatisfaction, that deep longing for something else with stuff, no one's tried more ideas for that than Russell Brand, I imagine. Okay? Drugs, sex addiction, he's had fame, money, all sorts of popularity, all sorts of other things in his life. And he's come to that realization that none of those are actually the answer to that. The answer is a relationship with God. And ultimately, that's what we've been talking about here for 8 weeks. So it's hard, funny thing to talk about a relationship with God, because what is it? It's so hard to see and so hard to appreciate. So I want to just finish with just an analogy that struck me just 2 nights ago. So Friday night, at 11:30 in the evening, I'm lying in my back garden, watching the Northern Lights. I don't know if you did get to see it, anybody? Saw a little bit. We had some pinky skies over Cockfosters where Becky and I live. And so we turned off all the lights, we'd gone out in the garden, and we're lying there they are, and we were appreciating the Northern Lights. And it took a while to get your eyes adjusted and everything like that. And then while we're lying there, we hear the back door of the neighbour's house open up. And one of them steps out, and they've still got all the lights on, and he kind of looks out and he says, no, I can't really see anything, and goes straight back in the house. Right? And they were there. They were right there. We'd been lying there for half an hour, watching them. And it just struck me to sort of, it's easy to miss it. A relationship with God is not necessarily something that's instantly going to come to you. Look how long it took Russell Brand, and a lot of us took a long time in our lives to really understand what it was. So don't rush it. If you're somebody and you don't really know what that is, relationship with God or what it means, then talk to Christians about what it is to them, what they do. Spend some time in prayer. You're just talking to God. Okay, reach out. And read the Bible. Take some time. And just, invest in it. It's like switching the lights out and giving it some time. Spend some time with God and let him be in charge. I'm going to pray a short prayer, and then Laura's going to come back up. Lord, I just pray on behalf of those of us who are seeking to follow you in our lives. Lord, where we've drifted away from that and put other things in control, or we lean on other things in our lives or other people, Lord, help us to see that and help us to move back and rely on you. Help us to be different and to find confidence in living differently in the way that Jesus showed us how to live, with compassion, with selflessness, with kindness. And Lord, I pray for anybody here who is still seeking, who isn't quite sure who you are, where they stand with you, whether you are there, Lord, I just pray you reach out, you reveal yourself, Lord, and help make that connection. Amen.